Bonds of love we make. You'll have to lead that. Let's do it in English first. We'll start where it's familiar. Ready? God of nations, let thy feet in the bonds of love we meet. Hear our voices, we entreat. God defend our free land. God Pacific's triple star from the shots of strife and war. Make the praises heard afar. God defend New Zealand. Now Monty's going to lead us in the Maori version. Go for it. E ora atua, o ngai wi matora, ata whakarorona, mea ora loa. Kia ua ko te mai, kia tātou atawhai. Mana aki kia mai, Aotearoa. You've done good, guys. Well done. Take a seat. Thank you. Good to sing. Best place to sing is in the shower. I always sound like a robbery when I'm singing in the shower. But don't forget to sing. The Bible says, be filled with the Spirit. Speaking and singing to yourselves. Psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. Singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. The Bible says if anybody's miserable, let him pray. And if he's happy, let him sing. Don't forget to sing. Our ancestors sung. We need to not lose that habit of just singing. Be filled with the Spirit. All right, so any leftovers from this morning, any debriefing necessary from this morning? I've got to tell you, my wife says Dave Riddell is a bit like Marmite. A little bit goes quite a long way. So, as a result of the morning's work, is there any Marmite you want to process, please? Yes.
When you were talking about being assertive, you talked about asserting a proposition.
Yes.
And then explaining what the consequences are.
Yes.
For me, that initially sounded like a threat.
Yes.
If I do this, I will.
Yes.
This will happen.
Yeah.
But as I listened to you talking about consequences versus punishment,
Yes.
are you really saying when you assert the proposition, explain what will naturally follow if that is done?
That's correct. And it's very important for your mind that it makes a distinction and a clear distinction between natural consequences that are self-imposed by choices and artificial punishment that's laid on somebody. You know, with children, you need to punish them so they learn the difference between right and wrong. But when they become teenagers, they'll learn faster from the consequences, as long as somebody isn't rescuing them from those consequences. Rescuers are a liability in a teenager's mind in the sense that they don't learn from consequences if there's a rescuer who always comes between their choice and the consequences of that choice. Now, obviously, you have to intervene from time to time, but if you're learning to climb in the mountains and the guide says, don't climb there, it's out of your skill range, there's a crevasse there, you stay away from that. Otherwise, you're going to die. And you say, are you threatening me? Is that blackmail? Don't be so stupid. Distinguish between consequences and punishment. You see, hell is not a punishment. When you're punishing somebody, it's for the purpose of learning a lesson. There is no lesson to learn in hell. There's only utter despair. And that's why we have to understand that hell is not a punishment, it is a consequence. If you live every day as if there is no God, or if you live every day saying, my will be done, to hell with yours, you will end up in hell. because you've alienated yourself from the love of God every day of your life. The consequences are that if you say to God, my will be done every day of your life, and take no thought for his will, one day God will sigh, shrug his shoulders and say, okay, your will be done now forever. I will never trouble you again. That's a consequence. Got the difference? Understand God is not willing that any should perish, but through sovereignty, people exercise their own sovereignty to their own destruction. And that's the consequence of living godless. And I'm talking about anybody who can look at the stars and not give tuppence for who put them there. No respect for the Creator at all. And that's why Paul said they are without excuse. Because every night and every day nature has poured forth knowledge of God, and they have denied it, resisted it, suppressed it their whole lives. That's why they must inherit the consequences of living godlessly. But that's not punishment. Punishment is something we artificially institute so that somebody can learn a necessary lesson. They can make a connection. And so don't ever confuse pointing out consequences with threatening. You are not threatening. You can threaten a punishment, but you can't threaten natural consequences. They're going to happen, ready or not. And this is one of the fusions that causes confusion. And at the end of the day, I'm going to take you through a bunch of fusions that are going to cause your whole life confusion if you don't get them sorted. Intelligence is the ability to make distinctions. Wherever you have failed to make a necessary distinction in your life, you have blinded your intelligence. And I'll show you exactly what I mean in one instant. For example, have you distinguished the difference between submission and subjugation? There's a very important difference. And if you don't distinguish that difference, you probably will never distinguish authoritative from authoritarian, which is another very important distinction for a father and a husband to make. Some of you guys, you are brought up under an authoritarian father and you've learnt to be authoritarian. So you believe in the gospel of subjugation. The problem is there is no subjugation in the Trinity. And so to be an accurate reflection of the love of God in the Trinity, you need to change your view and understand the difference between submission, which is trust-based, and subjugation, which is fear-based. They're two completely different things. And when a father is stuck in fear-based subjugation, he will never earn the trust of his wife or children. You've got to take that movement from authoritarian to authoritative. Otherwise, you will lose the trust of every child and the woman of the wife of your youth. This is important to understand. So growing up in maturity is making essential distinctions. I've been accused by the New Zealand media as being a conversion therapist. And somehow that's become the new crime and the new sin for counsellors. Yes, I am a conversion therapist. I have led many men out of same-sex attraction and many women out of lesbian attraction because of the insights that God has given me. So you could say I am a conversion therapist. On the other hand, if you define conversion as coercion, then I am not a conversion therapist. There is absolutely zero coercion in my counselling. Get the difference? Now, the whole of the country went blind in terms of the difference between coercion and conversion. If you look up the dictionary under conversion, there is no element of coercion implied at all. It's simply a radical change of mind. That's all it is. But somehow conversion has become a whip word. And I got pilloried by the media because I did not refuse the right to speak about same-sex attraction to my clients. That's become illegal now, by the way. Thanks to the Christians who were sound asleep while it was getting passed through by Jacinda. Thank you, Jacinda, for nothing. She pushed it and got it through, even though the Parliamentarian Council advised against it as a breach of civil rights, as a breach of freedom of speech. That law was passed against the original law of the freedom of speech. You understand that? And that's why I'm scared of hate speech laws, because hate speech laws will turn hate speech into a whip word, And what they really mean is that you're not doing hate speech, they just hate what you're saying. And that will become a crime too. It's already begun in this country. And that's why I wrote the War Chest, because in the War Chest I teach people how to fight back on that nonsense. Your enemy could become the Health and Disability Commission, because they have the power now to censure you for what you say to an employee or to a client. Yeah? And when the emperor's got new clothes and he's actually stark naked, the boy who says the emperor's got no clothes on will be criminalised. And that's what's happening now. And that's why I wrote War Chest. Because I found pastors and senior Christians ducking for cover who were afraid to speak up on the subject. They've been intimidated. That's a problem. Anyway, that's not what I came to speak to you about. But it's interesting, isn't it? Isn't it? Or is it just me? It's true, I have got a busy brain. But you know, I believe in learning to love God and truth with all of my mind as well as all of my heart. It's got to make sense, guys. It's got to make sense. Otherwise, your loyalty to it will be only half-hearted. And we've got to be smarter than that. You know, when you're in a church group, you need a balance of power. You need a balance of power with your wife, your husband, your pastor, the elders. What do you mean you don't have a husband? It's quite fashionable now. Haven't you been watching TV lately? I never get used to a man introducing another man as his husband. I just will never get used to that. At least I hope I don't. My hope is that you understand that for relationships to thrive, there has to be a balance of power. That's you and the missus. That's you and your adult children. When a father will not allow an adult child to have a balance of power with him, they will never be friends. I'm going to say that again. When a father will not allow an adult child to have a balance of power with them, they will never be friends. They always want that hierarchy. Respect is not a hierarchy. Respect is mutual. And you earn the right to speak into somebody's life by showing them you're ready and willing to listen to them, even when you don't like what they're saying. And so in a church, if you don't give all of your power away, you'll never be hurt. You'll only be hurt if you give the leader, the boss, the big person, the power to determine who you are, or when you put your worth in their hands, or when you cannot and will not push back if they overstep the mark. Overreach is a real thing. We've seen successive governments do overreach. It almost destroyed our country when governments began to overreach with the mandates, etc. And we can see pastors who get a lot of power and mana and credibility start to overreach sometimes. They need to have their feathers clipped every now and again, because it's human nature to start to overreach when you've got the power to do it. And men do that with their wives when they discover they can easily intimidate their wife into subjugation. Don't get into overreach. And if you do get into overreach, or if you yourself feel like the employer is intruding on your boundaries, or somebody else is exercising too much control in your life, you must learn to push back. You must learn to protect your boundaries. God gives you sovereignty. You must protect that sovereignty. When I debrief people who have come out of Gloria Vale or some other religious cult, I say to them, why did you give so much power away? You were in a deal. You were in a trade. You gave power away so you can have status, or you could have salvation, or you could be given credibility, or you could be given mana. You gave too much power away to get that office in return. You should not have done that. You see, as a pastor, when I was pastoring back in Dunedin days, I told my people, the only power I've got to speak into your life is what you loan me. And if I abuse that power, recall it. Take it back. Okay? Because even as a counsellor, any advice I give you is negotiable, and any advice I give you is really only a suggestion anyway. You can take it or you can leave it. I'm not there to tell you what to do. I'm not there to take control of your life or to snatch power off you. And neither is any pastor or preacher. They are not there to snatch power over you. Any power they have to speak into your life is what you're loaning them. And you loan it to them when you walk into that building and sit down in front of them and are willing for them to teach you. But the wisdom that comes from God is peaceful, gentle, and easily reasoned with. If you can't reason with a man of God, then he's not a man of God. He's working on dogma and soul power. You have to be able to reason with it. The wisdom that comes from God is peaceful, gentle, and reasonable. Is that the way you operate with your children or your wife or the people that you employ to do your will? It has to be reasonable, guys. At the end of the day, if you're the employer, then remember this: the only power you've got to tell them what to do is what they're loaning to you. And the day you forget that is the day you're going to breed resentment in your workforce. That's a problem. So this is respect with its boots on. And I pray that no churches in Motueka will abuse the trust of the people sitting in the pews. But if the leaders begin to exercise in a legalistic fashion or in an intimidatory fashion, that somebody just gently points out to them that the only right they have to speak into these people's lives is based on trust that it will always be good for the people who are listening. Yeah? And if you feel like I'm teaching you anything, even here today, that is not going to be good for your life, you shouldn't stay, because we're in a pretend agreement. And I say to my students on day one, if I say anything to offend you, don't sulk, come and tell me. We can fix it. If there's anything that I say that hurts you, you've either misunderstood me or else I've pressed a bruise that you've carried, and it's time we healed that and got something done about it. Do you know that any time you overreact to something, it's because somebody pressed on your bruise? An overreaction is always a sign of an emotional bruise. And an overreaction can be shouting, yelling, swearing in anger, or it can be withdrawing, becoming passive-aggressive and sulking. That's right. That's right. And the answer is you learn to side with the truth against your feeling until your feeling shrivels up because it's not being fed by a lie any longer. The feeling will shrivel up, it will go away, but not until it's convinced that it's illegitimate. And so you have to be able to discredit the feeling. If you can't discredit the feeling, it'll stay strong, and your loyalty to it will remain. When you can discredit the feeling, and by the way, the quickest way to do that is to put on the mind of Christ. Fastest way to do that is to put on the mind of Christ. And just learn to say, I am not inadequate, I am not inferior, and I am not condemned. So I need to stop rehearsing that rubbish. I need to agree with God. There is now no condemnation if your life and innocence is in His hands. I made the Lord my vindicator when I was a child, and I had an older brother who was making my life hell. And I prayed, dear Lord, get rid of my brother or something bad is going to happen to him. Because he really was making my life hell. So I made the Lord my vindicator in prayer as a kid. Because my Sunday school teacher explained that we don't have to take revenge, we can make the Lord our vindicator. Revenge is too heavy a load for us to carry. And when you are defamed, and you will be defamed, and you will be misjudged sooner or later, if it hasn't happened yet, it's still coming. But you will be defamed, and you will be slandered sooner or later. At that point, by all means defend yourself, by all means speak up in your own defense, but there comes a point where you must make the Lord your vindicator, because you're never going to be able to exonerate yourself. And that's okay. Because that's the fate of anybody who wants to follow Jesus. They will be misjudged and misunderstood. But when you find that the churches have locked their doors because one pastor has defamed you around the town or something like that, then you better make the Lord your vindicator, because you're now carrying a load that's too heavy for you. And the Lord said, I will fight against those that fight against you. So I said to the Lord, deal with my brother, please, because if you don't, I'm going to. And I meant it, because he was making my life hell. I'll give you an example. I would turn up at school and the whole school would start taunting me and jeering me as orchestrated by my brother. The whole school. Admittedly, there was only 14 students, but that seemed like a lot. And that was, my life was purgatory. And I began plotting and planning against my brother. But I said to the Lord, I'll give you 30 days to exonerate me, because if you don't, I'm going to stick up for myself, and it's not going to be pretty. And I set a date on my calendar. Either the Lord will vindicate me, or I'll take the law into my own hands. You see, I'm an intense guy because I was an intense child. And that's why I need the truth. Because I was going to get something intensely wrong otherwise. But I knew hatred. I knew pure hatred as a 10-year-old. It was the only way I thought I could survive. And so I asked the Lord to be my vindicator. On the 30th of the calendar month, my brother took sick. We went to school, walked to school, 3.5 miles. Used to be 2.5, now it's 3.5. It'll be 4 at the rate I'm going. We walked to school. He recovered in the afternoon well enough, so he took the family car as a 12-year-old and he drove it down to the primary school. It was a country school. Things like that happened. And he picked us up. But just to make sure everybody knew that he could drive and how well a driver did, he dropped a wheelie on the tennis court. That night the phone went. And Mum and Dad had some long, earnest conversations with somebody I'd never heard of. And the next day, an official-looking car came along to pick him up. The day that I had planned my revenge. I looked up and I said, you leave it till the last minute, but I like your work. And that was the day I got my life back. And that was the day that peace came back to our school and peace came back to my life. Yeah? Let the Lord vindicate you. You don't have to carry bitterness. You don't have to carry resentment. You don't have to carry unforgiveness when you make the Lord your vindicator. Hey, you've made him Saviour. That gives you peace with God, right? But you still need to make him your vindicator to have peace with the other people in your community. Until you give the job of straightening up the injustice to God, you're too little to carry that load.
We talked about this, and I'm trying to track in the same direction, but that turning the other cheek, Jesus spoke of, just to clarify that, is that what you're talking about, allowing God to be your vindicator?
That's right. It's about becoming proactive and choosing your own response rather than letting your enemy choose it for you. I don't allow other people to decide my mood for me. I decide that. So it's the greatest statement of commitment to proactive dignity. You can't have dignity and be reactive at the same time. You can't be reactive and carry dignity. Until you choose your own response, you don't get the respect for the dignity that you should be displaying. So I will decide whether you can ruin my day or not. I will decide if my wife wakes up in a bad mood and I'm in a good mood. I will decide whether I'm in a bad mood by lunchtime or not. She won't. You get the idea? Choose your own mood. That's mana. That's status. That's dignity. Yeah. The victim mentality begins with trying to blame other people so that you can be innocent. It's a childhood drive to be innocent. And so you scheme and plan and find ways to pass the blame to somebody else. And since they've got the power and they've got the responsibility, you can be a victim, an innocent victim. And so to claim that innocence, you play the role of victim, and then you give more and more power away because, hey, you're innocent if they caused it. And so you practice powerlessness until you're a professional victim. And you don't take responsibility for your own choices. Here's the thing. It's like a scorpion. It carries a sting in its tail if you're successful in blaming the government or the employer or your wife or your kids or whatever. If you go through life blaming other people, you practice powerlessness. And as a result of that, you play the role of victim, and maybe you get a little bit of sympathy. But the cost of that is very, very high. The cost is powerlessness to do anything about it. It's a very tempting thing, but it's very dangerous. So I want to know, how do I need to take the log out of my own eye? Where am I not practicing initiative? Where am I becoming my own worst enemy? I remember my grandfather saying about my brother, he's his own worst enemy. And I've thought a lot about that comment. That's why people put themselves in hell, because they are their own worst enemy. Good question. Any more? Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are true victims. There are people who really have been perpetrated against. But a lot of the trouble that comes into my office is self-imposed. And my first job is to help this person see, are they the cause or just a contributor? Men can tear their own marriages down and be fully convinced that the wife is the cause. They have not seen their own contribution at all, and vice versa. So it is my job as a counsellor to help them see where they have contributed. All right, we can come back to that question. Do you mean a self-fulfilling prophecy where you bring about the very thing you fear?
Someone's been driven by their trauma.
Yes, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah.
You feel like you can't
Yeah.
confront them.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that both of your questions relate to me PTSD symptoms. Now, let's talk about PTSD for a moment. Post-traumatic stress disorder. I would say that probably 70 to 80% of you here have some degree of post-traumatic stress disorder. How can I tell? Because what happens is that echoes from your past have the power to eclipse the present and the present reality. That's how you can tell. Somebody is suffering PTSD when the echoes from their childhood or earlier years can overrule the present reality, and they end up in a mild psychosis. You know, The Bone People was a novel about that very same phenomena. The men that came back from Vietnam, my grandfather who came back from the war. So certain things would trigger. And anyone who is triggered is suffering PTSD. And all that means is that for a very short amount of time, reality has been eclipsed by the emotional echoes of an accident, a trauma, an abuse, an act of violence, or something that happened to them. And that's why if you've been singled out and humiliated in a classroom or in a church or in a situation of a crowd, you're always going to get hit by those echoes, however briefly, whenever you're back in a classroom or a church or in a crowd. So that is PTSD, and what you've been sharing here is where I need to help a person side with true reassurances against their own emotional responses until those emotional responses dry up. Yeah. And I have left my business card over there on the table. If anybody feels like that's you and you want some help to get on top of those historic reactions, because they're not doing you any good now. And what I will teach you and your subconscious is that was then, this is now. And in pre-marriage counselling, I always go there. What belongs to back then with your dad or your mum, and what belongs to now with your husband or wife, so you can tell the difference. Because if you don't get that distinction clear, you will think of your wife like your first wife, or you'll think of your husband like your first boyfriend or your father, and you'll get them mixed up in your brain, and you'll end up giving responses that are totally inappropriate to the situation. You will be acting out of history rather than out of the present. That's PTSD. That's a psychotherapist's short guide to therapy. Make sense? You know, every man who came back from the war had some sense of PTSD. And everyone who survived a horrific accident will have PTSD to some degree. But it could be anything that invoked overwhelming humiliation in your life, or an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. And anybody who's been in a situation where you believed you were going to die is always affected by that experience for the rest of their life from time to time. Making sense? Yep. And that's where I can come in, because I can rewire your subconscious to stop doing that, to stop scaring you, to stop freaking you out, or stop invoking waves of embarrassment and humiliation when actually they're no longer appropriate. And what's all that about? Well, it's just like Jesus presenting Peter with the little fire and the fish and so on, and taking Peter through an exercise where he revalidated himself as an apostle and he revalidated his love for Jesus. He was coming out of PTSD by that new redefining moment. And a lot of guys here, I can sense in the spirit, could really do with a redefining moment before you can sing in public, pray in public, lead men in public, or reach out and father children. You're going to have to get through that redefining moment. Why? Because it conflicts with how you see yourself. This is going deep, guys, but this is just therapy for the subconscious mind. And, you know, the subconscious needs to hear the gospel as well. Doesn't it? Yeah. You're cool. If this interests you, if this really does interest you, just enroll in my 2-week course. We'll take you right through it and teach you how to train your mind to be your friend and then bring release to others. We run 4 of those schools a year. We've already done 2, so there's 2 more to come. The dates are on the website, Living Wisdom. Right, so how are we doing for time? That's good, we can do that. What I wanted to take you through now, a little bit about burnout. Would you like that? Yeah. Okay, let's talk about burnout. One thing that I can say about burnout is that God gives you a warning. Before you get to burnout, you get a warning. Yeah, because burnout is traumatic and it can stay with you and do its damage for years afterwards. But burnout comes after the warning, and the warning I've come to call brownout. And brownout is when your get up and go has got up and gone. Brownout is when your body goes left to work, but your heart goes somewhere else. Brownout is when your body and your heart start separating. Brownout is for people who don't know who they are yet, and they're in the wrong job or the wrong position in life. They've lost ownership of their vision. They've lost ownership of their own career. They don't know who they are, so they're in the wrong job. They're hating it. They're running on obligation. And the fastest way to burn out is to run on obligation. Obligation means that the motivation is outside of you, it's not inside of you. What's another word for having your motivation inside of you? It's ownership. When you have ownership of your life, you're one happy chappy. You're a happy camper if you've got ownership of your marriage and of your place in life and of your career. You will not be happy if you're running on ought to, should, have to, must do, and obligation. There is no source or furnace or generator of enthusiasm if you're running on obligation. In fact, the Greeks thought that enthusiastic people were filled with God. And they thought that depressed people, God had abandoned. Well, they got it partly right, because you see, the law of liberty is the law of ownership. The royal law that James speaks of is the law of ownership. There's no obligation in the royal law. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ has set us free, and don't be entangled again in the yoke of obligation. Now, here I distinguish between obligation and faithfulness. I am faithful to my calling, but I'm not obligated. To me, obligation is the motivation is outside of me, like a Jew under legalism or Mosaic law. I am not under legalism. And so, can I encourage you to know who you are? Because when you know who you are, you'll make the choices to affirm who you are, and you won't end up selling your soul for the superannuation. Don't sell your soul just to pay the mortgage. Don't sell your soul just to meet all of your obligations. Make some changes so that your heart is in what you do. And if your heart is not in what you do, you'll be a pain to yourself, a pain to your employer, a pain to your clients, and a pain to your fellow workers. Because your heart's not in what you're doing. I wandered up to a pastor after a sermon one day and I said, "When did you leave the pulpit?" He said, "I haven't left the pulpit." I said, "Yes, you have. Your body's still there. You left it there because it was convenient. You got your salary, you got your wage, but your heart is not in that pulpit, and I want to know where it is." And he said, "And I want to know who you are." And I said, "I'm a guy who's spent his life serving the ministry to make sure they guard their enthusiasm and stay enthusiastic for the ministry. I supervise a number of pastors to help them stay and keep their calling, because otherwise they're going to end up selling real estate or cars. They'll get disillusioned and they'll burn out. You know, I've seen pastors burn out in ministry with a dozen people in their congregation. It's not about how hard you work. My grandfather worked harder than any man I know. He never burnt out because he loved his farm and he lived for his land and he lived for his agriculture. He just loved every day. He was up at dawn every morning just loving what he did. And he worked actively right through till he was 80 years old. And I put that down to the fact that his heart was in what he's doing. But I've seen men at 60 look like they're already 80 because they've been running on obligation for years. They're drained, they're tired, they're sick of it. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. And it comes back to an identity crisis. You don't know who you are. You've forgotten who you are. That gifting, that ability, that talent that God has placed within you still hasn't even been recognized, let alone given you a source of earning. Anything you love doing, you can make money at if you strategize. I just love the time I've spent with guys teaching them how to make a living out of the thing they love doing most, which is not eating and sleeping, by the way. That's called hiding. We don't count that. We don't count that. And so you can make a living at doing what your heart is in, but you'll have to strategize it. Right now, there's no place on God's earth I would rather be than right here. Then that's why I can do it all day long, because I'm getting bread fed through it in my gifting. If you're in your calling, you'll look forward to going to work every day. And that's what Mark Twain spotted. Do you remember his quote? Come on, Mark Twain. Find a job you can love and you'll never go to work another day for the rest of your life. Do it. Do it. If you can't do it, get help to do it. But do it. I don't care whether it's music or singing or growing green stuff. I don't care whether it's driving or swimming or what. There's a way of making a living at it. But you'll need to strategize. And you might need to get help to do that. Yeah? As far as I know, there is no way to make a living eating pavlova, but there are lots of other ways of enjoying your love of food. There is a way. And so, you know, I look at the jobs that people are getting today that were never even thought of 50 years ago. Just dozens of ways, you know. I look across the Lake Wanaka to the Roy's Peak Falls, and I enjoyed looking at those through my papi's binoculars when I was a little kid. Now I see that there are guides taking people up and down, scaling up and down the cliffs of those falls. And I thought my grandfather would never have believed you could make a living just doing that. But there are guys making a very good living just doing that, guiding tourists up and down those falls without losing them, hopefully. The other day I went on a couple of years back, I went on a running tour where we ran the Southern Alps, the trails in the mountains. And as a group, we ran trails, and there were two guys who were just running alongside us, very, very, very fit. And they were just guiding us, you know, sort of babysitters. And I had a blast. For a week, I ran trails that I would never have seen or heard of or invented any other way. When I ran the old Ghost Road, I thought if it weren't for these guys, I would never have encountered such a beautiful spot in the Southern Alps. Now, it never occurred to me as a kid that you could make a living just jogging people through the mountains. Come on, if you can imagine it, there's a way to make a living doing it. And that's how you move from ownership, from obligation to ownership. But you'll have to think about it because the Bible makes it clear you do not build your house until you've ploughed your field. A lot of Christians come unstuck and go broke because they kept trying to build their house before they'd ploughed their field. And they will not take that proverb seriously, but every Jew does, and that's why every Jew becomes rich. Because they take a proverb seriously. Now I'm generalizing, but I think you know what I'm saying. A field will pay for a house will not pay for a field. Unless you take in accommodation. Get the idea? Now that's the principle to become wealthy. I'm a wealthy man and I'm getting it out to places that are in need as fast as I can, and I do draw your attention to that. If you want to help me stop malaria and typhoid, just give me some money. I'll send it through to them. I'll tell you where it's going, and you can be in touch with the people whose lives you save. It takes me less than 60 minutes to get your money to these people who are in need, and you can have a look through those testimonies if you like later. My point is, it never occurred to me that I would be able to feed the other side of the world and keep them alive without even engaging another agency. There's things that are available now through World Remit and through other agencies that you could never have done even 10 years ago. And so for me, there is a way of making a living at it. And now you get all these social commentators, they haven't got a brain in their head and they're making a fortune just through giving their ignorant opinions. How did they do that? If they can do that, you can do it with your wisdom and your insight and your gifting. So that's how you avoid burnout, guys. Stay out of obligation, get ownership, stay in your talent, and get to know what God placed within you when He created you. In Ephesians 3:10, you discover the reason you are alive. Ephesians 3:10. Nobody can ever quote it to me. Nobody can ever tell me what it says. But that's the reason you exist, right there in Ephesians, or is it 2:10? I hate it when that happens. Hey, if you've got a Bible, read out Ephesians 3:10. I'll figure out right now whether I'm on the right track. That one and and John 14:21, they're my two favourite scriptures. What is Ephesians? 14, John 14:21. Amazing scripture, that one. But what does Ephesians 3:10 say? There it is. That's it. Okay, who's the church?
Us.
You are. The reason you exist is to make manifest the mind, the will, the character, and the wisdom of God to the principalities and powers of the universe. The invisible God, the hand of God needs a glove, and you're the glove. Okay? Every one of you are a facet on the diamond of God's character, a diamond without limit to the faces it has. And you are there to manifest something about God that has never been known before. That's ownership. That's knowing who you are. Don't forget who you are, because most people have forgotten. And now they live to pay a mortgage, or they live to feed the missus and the kids, or they live to whatever it is they've come to live for. You've got to get bigger than that. And you've got to say, God, show me my purpose. He's more willing to show you your purpose in life than you are to understand it. I promise you that. Yep. So I spend a lot of time as a counsellor helping people discover their talent, their gifting, that God has never ever given any other human being in the whole time we've been around. That's how unique you are. You have something that no other person was ever given. Have you even found it yet? Get on with it, guys. Time's running out. Get on with it. So that's why I try to play the violin, or I learn to sing, or I study scripture, or I take a car engine to bits and put it back together. That's why I plant and do a veggie garden. I'm still discovering where my talents really, really lie. And I'd like to think that doing what I'm doing now is one of those talents. What do you think? You can be the judge. But I don't want to waste your time.
Sorry, so what you're essentially saying, like, part of discovering who you are is understanding those different facets of yourself within, whatever it is, work, play, family, right?
You are his workmanship. You are his highest creation. You are his work of art. Let those surfaces shine, because there's something about God that only you can fully reflect. Yeah? I like you. You got a heart for truth. You can stick around. You can give me applause any time you like. But that's the truth. That's the truth. It's just his heart's just resonating with truth. I appreciate that. You are here to resonate with God and to show his light forth. But you can't do it if your spirit is starving for his words.
Yeah, because he says that when my word comes, I'll speak it out.
Yep. And that's why I said John 14:21 is my favourite verse. It goes like this: He that has my words in his heart I wouldn't have chosen that melody. He that has my words and keeps them, he it is who loves me. Now notice that Jesus does not distinguish between obeying and loving. If you love God, you'll obey him. There's no difference between obedience and love in the mind of Jesus. The Bible says, pursue that holiness without which no man will see the Lord. Remember that. Strive to keep yourselves in the love of God. So he says, he that has my word and keeps it, he it is who loves me, and he will be loved by my Father. And it doesn't stop there, and I will love him. And it keeps coming. This is the gift that goes on giving. And I will reveal myself to him. There is a promise that every one of you here can have a visible visitation of Jesus, but it's a highly conditional promise. If you really want to see him who is invisible, you must take John 14:21 utterly seriously. He is coming into focus for me. Slowly but surely, he's coming into focus for me. And right now, I can see him smiling at me. I can't tell you where he's standing exactly, but I can see the expression on his face. He's going, that's my boy wearing my big shoes. Yeah? All right, well, let's change the word faith for a moment to expectation. If we increase our expectation for what God will do, we are increasing our faith. And I'm not trying to subdue faith, but I'm trying to give you another way of understanding faith. Faith is heightened expectation of God's ability and competency and desire to meet with you. And in terms of wisdom, wisdom is knowing what to do with that. Yeah. So I believe God for healing and miracles. I'm convinced God wants to heal you more than you want to be healed. But you have to learn how to exercise faith. And that means increasing your expectation. Hope is not faith. Hope is hope. Hope is always in the future tense. But faith is always now. And so I am beginning to learn how to ordain reality by the word of faith. Not there yet, but I'm working on it. And so I encourage you to keep building your expectation. Now, that's what will feed your enthusiasm. And enthusiasm, you'll never burn out as long as your enthusiastic tank is filled up. You won't burn out. I think that burnout is when your get up and go has got up and gone, but what really happened was that your outgoings exceeded your intakings. And when your outgoings exceed your incoming, the upkeeping will be your downfalling. You get it? It's no different. Running on emotional overdraft causes bankruptcy. And you will burn out if you run on emotional overdraft. But it's fear that causes you to short-circuit emotional energy. Fear short-circuits your tank. You've got to deal with the anxiety and the fear because it's dogging you, chasing you, it's always there. And unless you turn around and trace it and face it and replace that fear, then you're prone to burning out. Because anxiety short-circuits your share of daily energy and emotion. And it's not healed by more sleep. More sleep can certainly help. You can even go on holiday to the Gold Coast, but as soon as you get back and look at the bank balance, fear is going to return again. And all of that money you spend on the Gold Coast is gone and wasted. You're no further ahead. You've just got more debt. And debt is a major reason for burnout. And people take on debt to maximum potential, and then they wonder about the fear and anxiety that stalks them because the borrower is servant to the lender. Do your best to get out of debt. Yeah.
Could you highlight Ephesians 2:10?
3:10, sorry. 3:10, yeah. Ephesians 3:10 just reminds us that an invisible God needs visible people to reveal his nature through, and that's you and me. We are like faces on the diamond of God, and every one of you can reflect something different because every one of you has a different face to reflect it through. Put it this way, an infinite God needs an infinite variety of people to bring all of his nature through to. How's that? And that's why I say, if you have horticultural tendencies, social tendencies, if you can earn the trust of animals or grow plants or build engineering projects, if you can have any talent at all, you will find a joy and a pleasure in doing that because that is what God has given you. Right, that's enough for that. Let's see, just do a time check here. Okay, we're good for time. So I'm just going to give you now what I call a quick fix for a hurting marriage. A quick fix for a damaged or hurting marriage. This is basically your get out of jail, not free, but quickly. If you want to get out of jail quickly, do these things and you will turn a damaged, painful relationship into something that is good for you. And the reason for that, because the man is the initiator, the woman is the responder, garbage in, garbage out, rubbish in, rubbish back, you've got to learn to invest something better into that relationship. And this will tell you how. Let's have a quick look at it. You're not going to see too much of me, so I'm going to pump everything into you here that I can while I have the opportunity. Admittedly, it's concentrated, but you've got until I see you again to process it. This is called marriage crisis. Heal it quickly. And if you don't need it, your brother does, or your uncle does, somebody you know does. And if you're not even married yet, get on with it. Stop mucking about. I say to the girls, I say, if you've been dating this guy 3 months and he doesn't know whether he wants you or not, take him back to his mother. She hasn't finished cooking him. He doesn't know what he wants. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know where he's going. Put him back in the oven, please. He's half-baked. Because you can string along a woman for ages simply because you don't know what you want or who you are or where you're going. Don't do that. Don't do that. It'll backfire. You know, I like a simple formula that sums up everything. I know it could be guilty of generalizing, but try this one on. After about 40,000 hours of marriage counselling or marriage repair work, I reckon I almost know what I'm doing. And I got to tell you that the health of that relationship cannot be better than the mental emotional health of the two individuals in it. Which means I don't even have to see them together. If I can fix his mental emotional health and give him some relationship skills, and if I can do the same for her, that marriage will come right without me even seeing them together. The only reason I need to see them together is that I can come to the truth that they're not telling me. Now let me say this again. When your mind is your friend, you can be a friend. But until your mind is a friend, you cannot be the friend that woman needs. And vice versa. As long as her mind is condemning her or spooking her or frightening her, she cannot be the friend you need. So in pre-marriage counselling, I look at his mental emotional health, I look at hers, and then I point out where the pitfalls are going to be. Why? Because forewarned is prepared. Forewarned is forearmed. And I do have the ability now over thousands of hours of counselling to see what traps are up ahead of these two. And I do that by looking for three things in their lives. Now this is way too deep, way too quick, but it might be of interest to some of you. I look for three things in their lives to see if they're ready for marriage. Number one, I look to see what emotional bruises they're carrying, what scars they're carrying, because every time their spouse inadvertently presses on one of those bruises, there's going to be an outcry. And the bruise could be feeling unheard, it could be feeling condemned, it could be feeling criticised, it could be feeling judged, it could be feeling corrected. Any one of those can be a bruise. And every time the spouse presses on that bruise, there's going to be an outcry. Now, if there's a cross-matching of bruises, their marriage is not going to survive. I'm glad they're both Christians, but it's not going to survive. Because nobody stays with somebody who keeps fingering their bruise. Why? Because that's their unbearable feeling. I didn't say it was their unpleasant feeling. I said it was their unbearable feeling. They would sooner ditch the marriage than live with that feeling any longer. And if you marry somebody, and I think back now, I trained as a therapist because my marriage was not going to last if I didn't locate these insights and put them to work. We were both devout Christians, but we were not going to last together. You know, I married, perfect, Miss Perfect. I just didn't know her first name was Always. She married Mr. Right. She didn't know his first name was Always. We were in trouble. When I understood that I was pressing on her unbearable feeling at the same time she was pressing on mine, it all began to fall into place. What I needed to stop doing, what she needed to stop doing so we could live in peace. For example, what if her unbearable feeling was not knowing what's going on? Outside looking in, trying to play catch up. What if that was her unbearable feeling? She couldn't bear that feeling of not knowing what was going on. What if my unbearable feeling was feeling interrogated by a woman? Click, 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 click. Make it all line up. Join the dots. At that point, I'm in full defensive mode, and so is she. And when you're on the defensive, the one thing you cannot do is love the other person. You cannot go on the defensive and be loving towards the other person at the same time. You're either on the back foot or the front foot. So that's the first thing I want to know about this couple. The second thing I want to know about them is what echoes from the past are breaking over their heads like a massive surf wave and drowning them. What echoes from their past? From sexual abuse, from domination, from intimidation, from trauma. what echoes from the past are freaking them out and causing short-term psychosis. Because that's going to play havoc with the relationship as well. Anything that they are overreacting to. The third thing I want to know is, what is your default mood? Is your default mood cynicism, pessimism, or optimism? It matters. Some of you old cynics, listen up. When did you learn to hide in cynicism? When did you learn that pessimism is the best way to keep safe and to keep your heart safe? You better give it up. It's soul destroying for your children and for your spouse.
Can you get different default modes?
Yes, you can.
In one person, I mean, sorry.
Yes, you can. Not too many, but 2 or 3 certainly. And so your default mood at church may be quite different to your default mood at home in front of the big screen, may be quite different to your default mood when you're at work. But we do slip into these automatic emotions. They are grooves in the neurological circuits of your mind. And it only takes one truth coach to dig you out of that groove, but if you don't have it, you can stay in that groove your whole life. It takes one truth coach to lever you out of that groove, because the thing about a groove is that it becomes a ditch. And the thing about a ditch, and this is the same with pornography, the thing about a ditch is it becomes a river. And the thing about a river is that it becomes a chasm. And the thing about a chasm is it becomes a Grand Canyon. And your whole mind can collapse into that default mood as a result of that chasm. And that's why pornography is so dangerous. You will become a dirty, old, degenerate old man if you keep up the pornography habit. That's where you're heading. Because that ditch, that neurological groove is just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. That's why it's so dangerous. Well, it's one of the reasons. So 3 things, people: your default mood, your unbearable feeling, and your fusion. So I'd like to teach you a little bit about fusions, please. I think we're okay. Yes? Yes. Yeah. 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 So the whole point of therapy is to downgrade a feeling from unbearable, i.e. traumatic, just down to just unpleasant. When you can sit with any feeling and any emotion, you can be perfectly trustworthy. But as long as you've got unbearable feelings, you are deeply untrustworthy. Because that unbearable feeling will take over. And at that point, you won't be able to control your rage or your anger or your choices or your decision making. Because why? Because you're running scared from an unbearable feeling. And I do mean unbearable. That's the bruise. Now this may be psychotherapy 101, but actually you'll have to do this with your children as a father or your grandchildren as a granddad, because sooner or later their nervous system is going to get an overwhelming, and you're the one that needs to debrief them. Yeah. Sooner or later they're going to be overwhelmed by sexual encounter, by assault, by fear, by a situation that makes them absolutely terrified. You're the one that'll need to debrief them. And that means you help them downgrade that feeling and help them understand that it's over. It really is over. You help them put a full stop after that experience. Otherwise, they're going to drag that experience. Anytime their feet don't touch the bottom in the water, they're going to panic. Anytime somebody's going too fast or they feel out of control, maybe in a boat, maybe in any situation where they feel out of control, they're going to be hit by that unbearable feeling. And you have the power to debrief them from that. You see, a stitch in time saves 9, and a single debrief with a calm, mature adult can save a lifetime living in reaction. Why? Because it's not what happens to a child that damages them for life, it's how they think about it. That's the truth. It's how they think about it that will damage them. It's not what happened to them, it's the conclusions they took away from it. And you can help them change those. But you have to figure out or find out what lesson they took away that they need to unlearn. You know, a lot of homosexuals and lesbians started out with a misadventure awakening to their sexuality. And you can help them rethink that. Yeah. Yes, yes, yeah. Well, that's a challenge for any therapist, and my belief is that before I even take them there, I'm going to give them 1 or 2 insights that they can hang on to while they're experiencing that echo. Otherwise, you re-traumatize them. And so I give them 1 or 2 reassurances, because that's what a truth coach is. It's a tailor-made reassurance, tailor-fitted, tailor-made, and then when they have that, then it's safe to revisit that experience, or it's safe to revisit that feeling. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. Yeah. Well, a truth coach could be, this person is not that person. This man is not that man. This teacher is not that teacher. This person in authority is not that person in authority who abused me. That was then, this is now. That's a truth coach. Got the idea? Another one might be, this feeling is only an echo. It's not even about now. I can step around it. Step around the echo. Make sense? Yeah? So that's why we teach them how to take captive every thought and how to say, I need to side with the truth against my feelings because my feelings are merely representing a time that's now past. Yep. Giving people permission to step around their feelings is a lot of what I do as a psychotherapist, because those feelings are utterly, totally out of date, but they haven't realised it yet. They just haven't realised it yet. Can we hand out fusions of the mind? I'm not going to get through everything I had planned today, and I almost never do, so that's not a surprise. But there's stuff here that I'd really like to get. By the way, if you want more copies of any of these, just email me. Let me put my address up here, because I can flick a soft copy to you, no problem at all. It is office at Living Wisdom. You can get anything you want at David's Restaurant. Office at livingwisdom.co.nz. If you want to ask me a question, if you want to donate some money to Riddell's gift account, if you want to get some more of these notes, just there's the one to go to. My wife, she backs me up, and she knows what's going on. Me, no, I don't really know what's going on. So here we have one of my favourite topics. I call them fusions. I don't know where else you're going to learn this stuff, but this is one of the most useful concepts I could possibly teach you. Are you ready?
Yeah, we might need that then.
I call this fusions because they're really the weldedness of concepts in our brain. And over the page you'll see an example of some beautiful welding, a snapshot of Paul Grayson's work. Anyone know Paul? Very grateful to Paul. On the way out of my property, he spotted a weld that was dysfunctional, and he whipped out his welder and fixed it in 2 minutes. I couldn't believe it, and did a beautiful job. And so I'll dedicate this lecture to him. You can tell him he should have been here today. All right. You know, intelligence can be defined as the ability to make subtle distinctions. If you want to be the top of your job, the top of your discipline, if you want to be really, really, really good at your job, here's a tip, here's a hint. This will take you to the top in your profession. Assuming, of course, that your heart is in your profession. All right? Take the glossary seriously. Psychology has a glossary. I take it seriously. Medicine has a glossary. Anatomy has a glossary. Horticulture has a glossary. Agriculture has a glossary. Engineering has a dozen different glossaries. Take the glossary seriously in your discipline if you want to become very, very good at what you do. Because when you're very, very good at what you do, you can stop advertising. Your clients will do all your advertising for you. And my hope here is that you grasp this concept, because where your brain has fused, you stop growing. In my glossary, there's a term called arrested development. And your development will arrest everywhere your brain has a fusion. Let me run a few past you quickly, and I'll explain it first. Follow me here, learning to make the essential distinctions. Confusion, the result of the fusing of two different concepts or emotions. I'm just reading from the top. If it's true that intelligence is the ability to make distinctions, the book The Outliers, anybody read it? Great book. It must also be true that the inability to make essential distinctions limits intelligence, emotional intelligence in this instance, and often proves quite disastrous to success and to life and to progress. For example, can you distinguish between submission and subjugation? If you can't, you have a fusion. And that fusion will work against your success in relationships as a father and as a husband. What about delegation from abdication? Many employers have built a good, successful little business, and then they've taken on staff, but they've confused delegation, which you have to do with staff, with abdication, which you must not do with staff. Why? Because if you abdicate, you might discover that one staff member can bring your business down. So what is the difference between delegation and abdication is a very good example of making distinctions, essential distinctions, especially as a mother or as an employer, as a father of teenagers. Get that difference clear. Don't call it delegating if you're actually abdicating. You'll be sorry. What about reality from perspective? Can you tell the difference between reality and perspective? What is likely to happen if you can't distinguish the feelings arising from being corrected? How are you with being corrected, by the way? Because it doesn't depend on who's doing it. It depends on whether the correction is valid. With the feelings arising from feeling dominated or humiliated. Have you fused being corrected with being dominated or humiliated? I didn't rip into you. I merely corrected you. Why have you fused being corrected with being abused? Get the idea? If you only experienced correction by your authorities as a child as criticism, humiliation, mockery, or antagonism, then you're always going to feel humiliated when you're corrected. Why? Because you haven't made the distinction between being corrected and being embarrassed. Or what about those who are afraid of their own company? They haven't made the distinction between being alone, which many of you will face in life, and being abandoned. Alone is not abandoned. And yet many people cannot distinguish the two. If they are alone, they've been rejected. No wonder they feel lonely. But my brain says, yes, you are alone. That doesn't make you lonely. You got the idea? Can you make that distinction yet? You haven't reached maturity until you've made friends with your own company. You'll be on the run, always looking for a distraction when you're alone. Oh yeah, we're going deep here. In order to heal we then find that the later re-experience of that feeling always brings with it the negative interpretation that is now no longer appropriate. It's the law of first introduction. You know that if you lose a pet's trust, a young animal's trust, it's very hard to earn it back. They have fused you with danger. And you're going to have to work to help them distinguish you from danger. Once you've stuffed that up, it's pretty hard to get it back. Animals, horses, ducks, whatever. I keep pigeons, and I had their trust. They would climb all over me. They did not fear me. We were mates, and they knew where their food came from. But one day, one of them had a ring around its foot that began to cause infection or damage to the foot. And so I needed to catch that pigeon to heal it. And so I grabbed my net, did a quick swoop, made an absolute stuff of it. The whole flock went flying, including the one that I was trying to help. Missed the one I was trying to help. That flock would not come near me again for days, because now they had fused me with danger. Get the idea? So the good thing about people is that you can actually help them revisit and revise the event. It's more difficult with pigeons. Yeah, over time and lots of feeding. Built them slowly. I recently adopted a duckling, a mallard duckling. And we were great mates. We bonded. There was critical period attachment. There was imprinting. And as far as that duck was concerned, I was daddy. And so she'd follow me wherever I went. And it couldn't fly, so I had to teach it to fly because it didn't have any role modelling. So I used to run up and down the lawn, and she would chase me until she got fast enough to actually get lift. And once she got lift, boy, she was off. But I had to teach her how to fly. And that's one of my greatest achievements. Well, anyway, the time came for summer and for time for swimming, and so I dived into the pool. Well, she scattered. She cleared out. Made too much noise, too much of a splash, gave her too big a fright. So she was several days before she would come near the pool. And then one day I was in the pool swimming, and suddenly I felt her beak on my heel. It gave me a hell of a fright, because I didn't know she was in. She had jumped into the pool and to decide to join the fun. But what is the point I'm making? I haven't the slightest idea. But it was fun. Anyway, she grew up, became a teenager, and then one day she left home. So only a few weeks back now, she's gone, and I'm hoping that she survives duck shooting season. But I believe she went in search of a duck called Drake. At least that's my theory. In this way, we distinguish between the concepts and thereby enable a separation of any following misled emotions. Now, the best way to teach this subject is to give you examples, yeah? Because the theory and the explanation doesn't always do it. So let's see if you're in this list, and I'm pretty sure you are. So do you want to go hunting for yourself? Let's see if you can find yourself in this list. When being disappointed is indistinguishable from despair or futility. You know, what motivates control freaks, crazy makers, and the stubborn ones is all the same thing. It's the fear of being disappointed. You become stubborn when you're afraid of disappointment. You become a control freak when you can't do disappointment. You become a crazy maker when you don't do any disappointment. You have got to distinguish the disappointment of adulthood from the despair and powerlessness of a child who is repeatedly disappointed. You've got to make that distinction. This is not despair, David. This is only disappointment. You can get through it. It's going to be okay. Your throat hasn't been cut. It's not a reason to panic. It's only a disappointment. And then you develop patience, you see. And where there used to be rage and anger, now there's patience. Make sense? Can you distinguish between being corrected and being humiliated? When I went through a very bad place in mental health, became very deeply depressed and withdrew. As a teenager, I was living in Timaru in a boys' school, 200 boys in the boarding establishment that I was in for 5 years. There was no contact with females or matrons or maternal love at all. It was just the jungle, and it was Lord of the Flies for 5 years. Yeah, it was. During that time, I shut down and became depressed, partly because of the weather. I don't know if you know Timaru, but the sun doesn't shine in Timaru. Shines in Fairlie, shines in Temuka, but doesn't shine in Timaru. There's that sea cloud is there all day long. And it just, the sky closed in on me, and I shut down and became very depressed. And so I have permanently welded Timaru to depression. Until I found Jesus and I began to dig my way out of that depression that I had dug for myself. Years later, I thought the Lord called me to minister in Timaru. I asked him if there was a second opinion, please. But I braved it and I went to minister in Timaru, and sure enough, it was still grey and still depressed. I cannot distinguish Timaru from depression, because for me it's been such a traumatic time there. I almost took my own life on several occasions in Timaru, yes. Transmission anxiety? Do you mean your automatic gearbox is about to fail? Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you and I are going to have to talk quietly about that one. When housework or chores are indistinguishable from futility or obligation. Boy, if you can't distinguish between doing the vacuuming and utter futility, who's ever going to want to do the vacuuming? Yeah. When more responsibility just means more opportunities to fail or become accused. When being strict or firm feels like cruelty, control, or coercion. Consequences are not coercion, and they're not cruelty. They're not blackmail, and they're not pressure. When interviews are welded to feeling inadequate or rejected, who's going to want to go for an interview? You just predict feeling utterly inadequate, yet again. When submission is indistinguishable from subjugation. Remember, subjugation works by force and coercion. Submission works by trust. There's an important difference. When assertiveness is indistinguishable from aggression or rudeness. Did you know that assertiveness has nothing to do with aggression? There's no relationship to them. Assertiveness has nothing to do with being rude or disrespectful. As long as you weld those two together, how are you ever going to practice assertiveness? You can't. You'll have to clam up or blow up. When apologising is welded to weakness or injustice or powerlessness. Hey, apologising doesn't mean there's no justice. And forgiving doesn't mean there's no justice either. Now, over the rest of those pages there, I've just given you 60 or so examples of the kind of fusions that can cripple your progress and keep you in arrested development. And none of you here are accepted from this. All of you are on one of these 3 pages. And if you don't believe me, you come and spend an hour with me. And I will show you what has held up your maturity and what has held you back your whole life. Because it'll either be a fusion or it'll be a king lie, which is a conclusion you came to as a child that's flat out wrong and you've never reassessed it. Or it'll be an echo from the past. Take your pick. One of those 3 will be holding you as an emotional child. And I meet man after man in their 50s and 60s, scratch the surface and you'll find an emotional child just underneath. They can hide behind bluster and they can hide behind intimidation and they can hide behind staunchness and silence. But just underneath there's an emotional child who's stuck because of one of those 3 phenomenon. You know, I didn't come by this wisdom easily. I've spent a lifetime searching for the most useful insights I can possibly offer you. And I'm sharing them with you now, and I know that a lot of it's going over your head, but when you need it, it should still be there, and you should be able to refer back to it and say, yep, I reckon I've surfaced an unbearable feeling, or I reckon I'm hitting on a fusion of two different things in my mind, or I reckon I'm getting slapped around the ears by an echo from the past. And now you've got handles because your glossary has been increased. And when you have the words, you can do the processing. But as Helen Keller would tell you, you can't do the processing if you don't have the words. Yeah? Cognitive dissonance is a word. Double-minded is a word. Ambivalent is a word. Being projected onto is a word. Being misconstrued by other people is a word. Getting a twisted paraphrase as people try and manipulate you is a word. And as you have those words and collect up those phrases, you won't ever be powerless. You'll always know how to push back. If you want to. It's your call. But don't think you know it all yet. You're a long way short of knowing it all. And I hope I've demonstrated that a little bit today as well. Because arrogance is a great antidote to curiosity. And a lot of old guys like me have got arrogant and lost their curiosity. You know, it was a wake-up call to me to realise just the other day, 72 years old, and I've only just figured out why in a 24-hour cycle there are two tides. Why did I not know that? That'll be it. I knew there were two tides. I didn't know why there were two tides. And I've only just woken up to understanding that. I don't ever want to lose my curiosity. You know? It takes a light wave / particle, a wavicle, 8 minutes to travel from the sun to the earth. And right now you're looking at me with light, partial light, that came 8 minutes from the sun. And to think that when you look at the sun, you're seeing what it was like 8 minutes ago. And when you look at a star, you're seeing what it was like 1 million years ago. That's kind of cool, isn't it? Yeah, I know. Stretching a little bit of grey matter here. Don't lose your curiosity, guys, because intelligence is in direct proportion to whether you've kept your curiosity alive or not. Keep curious. Keep curious. Keep curious about church doctrine and church teaching. Keep asking questions like, well, if God commands us to love our enemies, how come he doesn't love his? Isn't that the ultimate in hypocrisy? Keep questioning. It's how you learn. I know that wherever I have a question, God has an answer. And I haven't stopped learning. And as a result now, I know the character of God. You cannot shake me with the silly ideas about why is there suffering if God is a God of love. You cannot shake me with dumb ideas about how come God doesn't have an age. You can't shake me with worries about where did Adam's grandchildren come from. Silly questions. Got to get beyond all that nonsense. There are good answers to all of those questions. Get curious, search them out. They're not that hard to find. With Google, you can figure it out real quick now if you want to. When I first of all went for a vaccine, we all know vaccines are safe. They are denatured antibodies. They can't harm you, but they'll galvanise your system into immunity. I went along for the jab like everybody else, although I was very suspicious that I didn't have a choice. Oh, they said I had a choice, but actually they were going to take my life away from me until I yielded to it. That's not a choice. That's coercion. The thing is, that first vaccine that I took in good faith bit me. It bit me like no vaccine had ever bit me before. And I thought, what the hell's going on here? So I got onto Google and I began to research mRNA. And within half an hour, I understood that it was not a vaccine. They had to change the definition of a vaccine to be able to call it that. And they got onto Webster's and they got onto Oxford and Cambridge dictionaries to do that. They actually got that changed, so that it could be rendered safe and effective, like vaccines had always been. And so the greatest deception in medical history was foisted on the whole Western world. Interestingly enough, a lot of the African countries didn't buy it. But that first vaccine bit me, and so by being curious about that, how come This was more than just a little bit of red inflammation. That thing bit and bit hard, and I suffered under that vaccine for 12 months, and I went to my doctor and I said, how come you don't know about this? How come I wasn't warned of these side effects? And how come one of my friends died within 24 hours of getting it? What the hell's going on? We have no excuse to be ignorant, people. Not with Google, not with artificial intelligence. We have no excuse. You can be willingly ignorant, but that's quite different. So I've got to tell you, knowledge is power, because without that knowledge, you can suffer under family mottos your whole life. You can suffer under misbeliefs your whole life. You can suffer under ignorance. And regarding sexuality, that's one area where ignorance is not bliss. Some of you are impotent. Some of you have frigid wives. What are you doing about it? Are you researching and getting your head around it, or are you just saying, c'est la vie, such is life, we just have to live with it? No, you don't. You have to get a bit smarter, and you have to love God with all of your mind. Because why? Because it's the truth that will set you free. I love my life. I love every minute of my life. And when I'm mystified, I sit down and figure it out. I don't live with another unknown. That stuff can depress you, it can discourage you, it can put you into survival mode. Well, I don't live in survival mode, I live in a life more abundantly. And I'm hoping right now to make you a little bit jealous. But I also know enough to know that a lot of Kiwi men have not distinguished the fusion of confident with arrogant. I'm going to finish with this. Don't make that mistake. You can't distinguish between confident and arrogant. I've done over 100,000 hours counselling. I am like 10 times the logged hours of any other counsellor in this country. I am not arrogant, I am confident. I'm confident in what I know because I've tested it 1,000 times. Doesn't mean I'm always right. I was wrong once, many years ago. But I have repented of that. No, seriously, we're all learning. I'm totally understanding of that. But I would like to be able to share something, just something of what I've learned. It takes me 2 weeks for people to start to really absorb what I've learned and what they can use in their own lives. And I call it the Living Wisdom Class of Counsellors and Life Skills. And you can enroll in that anytime you click on my page, anytime. So it'd be lovely to see you there. Be lovely for you to come along and spend 2 weeks with me wallowing in insight. But please, guys, as a Kiwi man, make sure that you can distinguish between arrogance, which is unteachability, and confidence. When a man knows his job, he's not insecure. He just knows what he knows. And wise people will learn from that person. You who are experts in your craft, in your trade, in your technical ability, stop being so modest. Be willing to share it. And be willing to say there's a right way and a dozen wrong ways. Hang in there till you've found the right way. I know that. I have taken the gearbox out of a car the wrong way. I have taken oil out of the sump the wrong way. I've done all these things the wrong way. You should go to YouTube and search for Who Needs a Man. It is hilarious. It's one of the funniest things you'll ever see. These women are convinced they can do man stuff. The outcomes are hilarious. You want to watch that. Just don't show it to your wife. She will not be impressed. Hey, there's a couple of things you've got to watch on YouTube. I like a good laugh. I haven't been here to tell you jokes today. I got a massive repertoire of jokes, but it's been too intense. It's been too important. I really wanted to get across what I needed to today, and I appreciate your patience with me. I really do. But I wanted something useful in your pocket when you left here that said you'd made the most of your precious Saturday morning. But I would ask you, don't remain willfully ignorant. Do something about it. Because as you get older, you get more content with the old. It's good enough. But is it really? Is your family paying the price of your happily self-imposed ignorance? Because they do. They want to be proud of you. The choices you make every day will help them become proud of you or prevent them from being proud of you. I know a faithful Christian and his wife, faithful Christians, faithful church attendants. Every child they had, and they had 6 of them, defensively detached from them while they were teenagers because their parents were an embarrassment to them. And every child stopped following the Lord because they defensively disengaged from their embarrassing parents. The parents loved the Lord, but they didn't have 2 clues about dignity and social decorum. See the problem? And they were content in their ignorance. And they lost the trust of every child. Tragic. I watched that because I was a Sunday school teacher of some of those kids. And I watched the parents undo all the work I did because they didn't have self-awareness and they had no idea how they were really coming across. Please cultivate self-awareness. It's important. Take the log out of your own eye. Now let's take some questions by way of finishing up and we'll see what you've got. Yes, please.
You mentioned that God tells us to forgive our enemies, but he doesn't.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, that's a cognitive dissonance, and that's a question that we should be curious about. It's interesting that Jesus even loved Judas. It's interesting for us to understand that God loves those who are in hell, but they have passed the opportunity when they can repent. The Bible says, in fact, it's interesting in the Song of Solomon, the Shulamite maiden, she said, "My lover tapped on the door, but I didn't come. And I was tucked up and didn't want to be disturbed. When I eventually went to the door, he was gone." The Bible says, where the tree falls, there it lies forever. The Bible says, "My spirit will not forever strive with man." And so he loves us and not willing that any should perish, but people have their own sovereignty and they must inherit their destiny. They must inherit their character and their choices. Doesn't stop God loving them, but he respects their sovereignty and he can't overrule it. Otherwise it wouldn't be sovereignty. All right, it's a fair question. It's an important one. Yeah, any more?
I have, read that the 10 Commandments leads to death, and yet the Holy Spirit leads to life.
Well, the simple answer to that one is that we cannot obey. In human nature, we cannot obey. We need a new identity. We need a new spirit. And we'll only find righteousness in that new spirit. We can't find it by compliance with the law. It was too much. Yeah. So by the commandments, knowledge of sin came in, and with that came condemnation. We needed a whole new revolutionary way of being righteous, and we've been given that when we received the Holy Spirit. Another one?
Because that's the new covenant.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, to deliver you from try-harder and self-righteousness and legalism, all you have to do is read Romans chapter 5 times in a row until you understand it. It'll deliver you from cultic Christianity, it'll deliver you from legalism, it'll deliver you from self-righteousness, it'll deliver you from condemnation and from try-harder, but you better understand it. There's only one place in the whole Bible where the same concept is repeated 5 times in 5 different ways. Bang, 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 bang. And that's Romans chapter 5. So you will never lose your grip on the gospel once you've assimilated Romans chapter 5. And there Christ is seen as the second Adam. Adam plunged us all into rebellion. Jesus plunges us into righteousness and innocence. It's as easy to become righteous and innocent as it was to be born into sin. But you've got to acknowledge it. You've got to hope in the mercy of God. Get that clear, will you? It's not try harder. I don't go to church and sing, "Count your obligations, name them one by one. Count your obligations, see what God wants done." What else he wants done? Count your obligations, name them one by one. And it will depress you how much the Lord wants done. You don't want that. You don't want that. You don't want Christianity to be a do-it-yourself patch-up. You'll just get tired. got to be better than that, yeah.
Could you give us some practical steps on mastering your emotions?
Yes, I can give you some practical steps on mastering your emotions. The first thing is to understand you cannot change your emotions. You can't. You can smile and be happy, but actually it's a forced smile, you know. Love you in Jesus. Can't stand you in the natural, but I love you in Jesus. You are not going to be happy or change your emotions by an act of the will. Okay? You have to understand that the emotions merely reflect the thinking and the self-talk and the beliefs. So when you can change the self-talk, and you actually read a book called Telling Yourself the Truth, because in telling yourself the truth, your emotions automatically come right. They are the consequence, they are the resultant, they are not the causal agent. The causal agent is what you're telling yourself and what you're believing. Now, if you can change that with truth coaches, then and only then will your emotions come right. Unless, in 10% of the cases, your emotions are unstable because of biology. If you've got an organ, a dysfunctional organ, you can have dysfunctional emotions even though you're telling yourself the truth, but that's different. What that means is that you can be an optimist by nature, but actually you're going through depression because you've got hypothyroid or because there's lacking of zinc in your or magnesium in your body or whatever. So in about 10% of dysfunctional moods, it is a biochemical, biological cause and it needs a biological solution. The other 90%, you need to clean up your self-talk. You're too pessimistic, you're too full of despair, you're too cynical, that sort of thing. And anxiety is the same. You've got to do a whole heap of anxious thinking before you can give yourself an ulcer. Correction, ulcers are not caused by stress. Ulcers are caused by a bacteria in your stomach, Helicobacter pylori. But if you tell yourself enough lies, you can get anxious all right. And interestingly enough, the stomach changes colour when you're anxious because its acidic chemistry has changed. That's for nothing. It was interesting that when the first doctor realised that it wasn't stress causing ulcers, it was actually a bacteria, he was mocked and ridiculed throughout Australia and New Zealand by the medical fraternity. They couldn't cope with that. No, stress. Everyone knows it's stress. So he got hacked off and he left Australia and he went to America and began to disseminate his findings there. They picked it up and ran with it. They realised that he was right. While he was over there, the knowledge filtered down to Australia and New Zealand. And when he came back, they said, yeah, we all know that stuff. I said, you didn't when I left. That's why I left. So it is partly, I've got to check, first of all, is it a chemical issue or is it actually volitional? And those are the two distinctions, chemical or volitional or chemical. Volitional means you're doing sick thinking. Chemical means you have sick biology. Yeah? Oh, brother, that's dangerous ground for me, antipsychotics. But, you know, anyone who's listened to the testimony of Jordan Peterson or his daughter will understand the danger of SSRIs. They have wrecked those two, and they've wrecked many of my clients. SSRIs and psychotropic drugs, they are addictive, but not in the way that we usually think of addiction. But certainly you can have a terrible kickback from psychotropic drugs. So I do my best to take people off those SSRIs and psychotropics. And the way I do it is with a way of coming off that is very carefully graduated. Normally when people come off medication, the reduction looks like that. It's a flat line. No, it's not a flat line. What is it? It's a linear line, thank you. Where's a good word when you need one? But no, hyperbolic tapering is the only way that's safe to come off those drugs. Yeah, hyperbolic tapering says you come down like this, quite steeply at first, and then more and more flattened out, so that, you know, that reduction is very slow. Give your brain time to get used to going without it. And it needs time. Yeah. So hyperbolic tapering is a new word for you. Don't encourage anybody to come off psychotropic drugs or SSRIs without understanding hyperbolic tapering. And if the doctor doesn't understand it, they need to teach them what it is. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I had to teach my doctor about mRNA vaccines, why they're not vaccines. Wrong doctor. Actually, you guys have got a couple of doctors over here that withstood that, and both of them got de-licensed for their trouble. Disgusting. And we lost all our best nurses. They went overseas when they discovered that they couldn't qualify to be in their own hospitals because they were smarter than the average nurse. Crazy. Very dark days for New Zealand those days. We're figuring it out now, slowly. So is America. Is that a hot potato? Well, I just have a way with hot potatoes. Sometimes I burn myself. Any more questions, because we're coming up to our end of our time? Yes, sir. Even if I did, I wouldn't admit it. Yes, yes. Crikey. Wow. I shall take a bow. I love it when my clients succeed. I love it when my students succeed. That's what I'm all about. Ensuring that anyone who comes to me for advice gets on the path to success. But it's God's success, it's not man's. And that's important too. Now, thank you for that testimony. Are there any other questions? Maybe the one you should have asked and didn't. Do you want to ask it now? Yes.
If you come across one of these points that you're listing here on the fusions of the mind, and,
Yes.
I might be with the help of Google and AI,
Mm.
my own AI, without counseling, to find that there are a few points that I can identify myself with, where to go to.
Okay.
Really hooks in what Jack asked in a simple project.
Yeah.
What to do is important. So I guess ultimately, where's our
Yeah.
encyclopedia to go for the answer?
Well, if I pull a muscle, I don't go to encyclopedia, I go to a physiotherapist, and if I have a damaged tooth, I go to a dentist. So if you've got a hurt heart or a hurt mind, come and see me. That's what I'm here for. You can send me a question over email. If I've got time, I'll answer it, but I'd far rather sit you down and make sure we do a good job. One of the reasons why burnouts struggle after burning out is because they're usually self-help people who try and fix themselves. You know, it's like Mr. Bean doing his own dental work. See, the thing about a blind spot, guys, is you don't know you've got it. You can't see it. I can see it. I can see it within 10 minutes of you telling me your testimony, but you can't see it in yourself. That's what a blind spot actually is. And so I do encourage you. I'm not one of these guys that wants to see you every week for the next 6 months or until you're broke. If I can't get you sorted within 3 sessions, I'm doing something wrong, and I may be able to sort it in the first session. I'm not there to encourage people to become addicted to me. That's just terrible stuff. But I want to see you on your feet as quick as I can. And I will go for your jugular, that's true. That's why you do need to trust me. But, you know, going for the jugular can be the quickest way to sort it out. Maybe that's a bad saying. I'm just going to scare them now, aren't I? Yeah. I'll give you some anaesthetic first, I promise. Any more questions? I love your questions. You've done so well. Thank you for them. And if you're passive-aggressive and you should have challenged me and you didn't, well, you can go away and stew on it. But I won't give it a second thought because it's not my problem. I know what's my problem and what's yours. I never get them mixed up. Well, thank you, Kit. You're responsible for this, I was going to say wonderful time. I'm not sure if everybody thinks it's a wonderful time, but I've had a wonderful time. And I really appreciate your initiative. You've shown me your leadership, and you've shown me that you've got a heart for these people and for these men, and I commit myself to helping you in any way I can whenever you need it. I'm going to leave you guys with some more notes. This is on negotiation skills, proposition, counter-proposition, that sort of thing. Just at a marital level. This is not at a lawyer's level, but this is at a domestic level, so I'll leave those there. And I'll also leave some notes, because I was up till midnight stapling these. I'm blowed if I'm going to leave them behind. I mean, take them with me. Escaping Addiction's Pit. We haven't had time to address addictions, but addictions are always a man's worst nightmare and worst enemy. And you should not be addicted to anything except truth. And so if you've got a habit that you know is bad for you, then gather up some ammunition and come against it. Why? Because it can rob you of your success, spiritual or physical. So I'll leave those there for you to take one home. And I thank you for your time. And I love the feel in this church. There's a nice presence here that I'm enjoying, and it's helped me to be free to minister as well. So God bless the congregation here. You're doing a good job. Can we just stand and have a prayer before we go? Father, I pray for your sons assembled here before me. I pray, God, that nothing that I sowed would be snapped or stolen away from them, but that would be good ground that would receive the seed and bring forth fruit. And Father, I pray that these men may know that you are for them and not against them, and that you are sympathetic to the difficulties of their lives, and that you only want to coach them into the truth. Lord, may their minds love truth. May they buy the truth and sell it not. Father, may they know this is the way to walk in it. And may you bless their work, and as they pull together and join together and grow themselves, that there will be no obstacle set by the enemy that can prevail. No weapon that is formed against this group of men shall prosper, but it shall be cast down so that the love of the brethren can continue unabated. I pray for Kit, Lord, and his vision, the vision you've placed in him, that he would see the fulfillment of that vision here. And everybody said, Amen. God love you. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.